Hi, so thank you for coming. Can you just start by introducing yourself and your journey so far?
My name is Anoushka. I'm 16 years old and I'm the founder of Kavach. I've been working on anti-bullying and adolescent mental health for about 7, 8 years now. And I've been awarded by the Prime Minister of India for my work. I was also the youngest entrepreneur to get funded on Shark Tank. And I truly believe in democratizing access to mental health for adolescents all across the world.
That's amazing. Um, because you're working with adolescents, obviously adolescence is a transition period and it comes with an enormous amount of vulnerability. To what extent do you feel like digital harassment, especially compared to offline forms of bullying, amplifies that vulnerability? Because obviously this is happening digitally. It's happening in our phones, which are in our back pockets all the time. Do you think that that makes a difference with the impacts that could come out of it or something like that?
I do think that with digital, it's definitely a more pronounced impact because unlike maybe facing harassment at a particular place, you can go home and forget about it. But with your phone or your laptop, it's always on you. It's you can't really escape it. And I also feel like when there is a way for people to hide behind a screen, uh, they definitely tend to be a different version of themselves and tend to be maybe uglier or more disrespectful because they have that barrier to protect them from facing actual consequences.
Of course. So anonymity does make digital harassment that much worse. But do you think that anonymity is something which also encourages teenagers to speak up? So obviously, Kavach offers anonymity, and it changes the way teenagers are able to report and talk about their problems. So do you think anonymity has some sort of value in helping to change and bring just general more awareness?
Definitely. I think anonymity and speaking up are directly related because obviously, with the kind of stigma that we're facing, it's harder to ask for help or maybe tell someone how you're feeling. But if you're not able, if you have the option of not revealing yourself, you tend to just seek help more proactively. And I also believe that you don't really have to reveal anything about yourself or divulge any kind of personal information to have the right to receive help. We're at a stage in our like general societal development where we can help people and we can extend a hand without necessarily knowing everything about themselves, about them. So yeah, anonymity is definitely a great way to, I think it has its ups and downs, but as a solution to get more people to speak up, it's definitely a viable option. And I've used it in all my solutions so far.
That's great. So another thing that I wanted to talk about was that oftentimes bullying happens within group dynamics. So it happens within places where you're having multiple interactions with multiple people. So there's a gray area online where those dynamics can often cross over to harassment. What do you think that we should be doing to help teenagers recognize when that line is being crossed?
So, in terms of recognizing harassment, there are telltale signs, and there is a very thin line between when something is a joke and when something is harassment. So, I think it's important that when we talk about certain issues, we also need to like pay special emphasis on actually identifying it and helping them develop the skill to differentiate between when it's a joke and when it's crossing into serious territory. Like, for example, with my work on anti-bullying with younger children, I tend to help them remember it using four main characteristics. So, for bullying, it needs to be intentional, needs to be repeated, it needs to hurt someone, and there needs to be a power imbalance. And this kind of is a simplification for sure, but it helps them remember it on the tips of their fingers. And if they're ever in a situation where they feel like they need to assess it, they can quickly kind of go through that and come to a more confident decision than they would if they didn't go through that mental exercise.
I think that that's obviously a great way to do. do you think that educational institutions are evolving quick enough to address all of the different forms of harassment that can come? So obviously, social media is much more pronounced now. Do you think that schools, NGOs are doing enough to keep up with all of the different advancements that's coming with technology?
I think that as an institution, you can really only do so much uh, if you're doing it alone. And the problem is that we put the onus on individual institutions or individual people to actually step up and do something. And while that's great, I think everything starts from one action. If we're talking about a larger impact, it needs to be systemic. So we need to have the right kind of policy in place. We need to have the right kind of legislation, the right kind of systems in place so that people can raise a flag or people can talk about the issues that they need to. If we don't have a like think tank about harassment and we don't actually do the groundwork and research to understand how it's taking place and what we can do to eliminate it, we're not really going to get anywhere with an individual school doing something. That being said, though, in my experience, I do think that schools are definitely trying, and especially education institutions like schools and universities are trying to maybe create more like ground-based initiatives. So, for example, in Delhi University, they've established anti-ragging committees. I think that's like a great option to have squads or groups within the school that are maybe doing something. So it's a more personalized approach. Something like that, I think, as we continue, as we discover new forms of like harassment and understand the issue more deeply, we'll definitely have better solutions crop up in terms of what to do for groundwork. But in the bigger scheme of things, it's systemic impact or it's nothing.
That makes sense. I think having changes coming from the top down also makes a huge change. So I watched your TED talk, and one point that really stood out to me in your TED talk, which was on, I think, the metaverse, which can change teens' lives, was how technology, which obviously is criticized for, worsening mental health, it could democratize access to care, and it could do so through immersive platforms like the metaverse. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
So when I was researching on immersive technology like a couple years ago, I discovered that there are quite a few VR therapies coming up, and something like VR could be game changing for someone who doesn't have access to in-person therapy because it's increasingly expensive. It's difficult if you attach all the additional cost of actually going to therapy and all of that, then it's a very expensive, a very prestigious affair. Not everybody is able to do so. I think with immersive therapy, it's definitely the access, the cost, but more specifically, the way that you're actually taking therapy is very different because you're in a space where there are no limitations. And even with something like maybe for example, if you're doing drawing therapy, which is a form of therapy, in person, you take a piece of paper and you'd like draw, or and then the therapist would kind of take you through what you've drawn. But in a VR space, you can essentially draw around yourself. You can sit in your drawings, you can zoom out. There's like endless possibilities. And that makes the therapy experience much more inclusive and much more exciting for someone who wouldn't traditionally like appreciate talking to someone in person. For example, if they're maybe a little conscious. And I think this is where anonymity comes in as well. The fact that you can have the experience of sitting in front of someone and talking to them about your feelings, but you don't need to reveal any personal information about yourself, will just make it so much easier for so many more people to feel more inclined to seek therapy.
Of course, I think it is a great idea because a lot of harassment is going digital nowadays to also combat that with technology itself. But I also feel like, obviously, within the physical realm, you have to have a support system. So, what do you think is the kind of support system or the kind of things that parents, families, friends should be talking about specifically for a teenager facing digital harassment, or just preventive measures that could prevent the worst from happening?
So I think everything starts from the parents, and I think the parents are the sole kind of, they have the most responsibility in the situation. And the first and most important thing is to actually talk to your child and be updated on their life. Make sure you know what's going on. What a lot of parents do is that they give the child the phone, but then they don't explain the child the dangers of it or how to stay safe, or even like monitor their activity online if they're younger. And that's really important. I also feel like if your child is facing some kind of harassment and you don't have a pre established relationship of trust with your child, then they will never come and speak to you and it'll go unnoticed. So, more than anything, more than even having the conversation, you need to make sure that your child can trust you to come to you when they have a problem and kind of get a solution without experiencing any judgment. So, that's the most important thing. I feel with friends, it's tricky territory because you're a child yourself and you obviously are not in a position to give professional advice to the other person. So I think the most important thing is to simply listen and try to encourage them to seek help. What a lot of friends do is they think they're doing their peer a favor by telling on them without their consent, maybe telling a counselor. But it's a very difficult situation to be in if someone has done something or taken a step involving you, but without your consent. And that's a very dangerous activity, I think, a territory to be in. So, as a friend, the most you can do is encourage your peer, listen to them, be there for them. It's more, I think, the adults, the teachers, the parents that need to actually take the onus to help the child do something about like a more problem focused strategy to focus on eliminating their experience.
That makes a lot of sense. So, just to end this off, I just want to talk about a little bit about what teenagers themselves can do. So, we've already touched a little bit on it, but you've built initiatives that have reached a lot of students. And as a teenager yourself, to what extent do you think teenagers are underestimating their ability to create change? So, oftentimes, I think that teenagers do you think that teenagers should be the ones to catalyst action, so they should be the ones to figure out policy gaps and bring them up, or to talk to adults and understand what is the right way to do it, or to those squads that you were talking about, to start those squads within their own schools, all of that?
Yes. I think teenagers underestimate themselves to a great extent. And if you feel like there's a gap in your community, we tend to have conversations with our friends about it. We tend to complain, but it's very rare that someone steps up and actually does something about it. So I would say if you're in a position, take the onus and take the responsibility. Nothing will make you feel better than solving a problem that you have faced and preventing it from happening to someone else. I also feel like if we're talking about teenagers taking the onus and doing something, we also need to actively create spaces for them to do so. So in my experience, the reason that I was able to create something so big was because I had a space to express myself. So in this case, I started by writing an anti-bullying blog where I would write about my experience and do research and kind of put it on the internet. And my teachers and my peers around me would help me circulate it. So the same way, if someone is facing a problem with, let's say, a cybersecurity issue and they want to talk about how to spread awareness, there needs to be an established way for them to go about it, or there needs to be a way, like a place they can go to essentially to start something so that they have some support. Like with you, PP has been a great platform for you to do something. And just like that, they need to have spaces as well. So that's what I think.
That makes a lot of sense. The another question I wanted to ask you was, of course, you've built Kavach from the ground up. You had to go to schools, you had to get investors, you had to get students to take you seriously. I think that obviously you need a space as a teenager to be able to express yourself, but then a lot of it has to come from you too. So how do you get adults, organizations to take you seriously as a teenager?
So for me, in my experience, like I think this is just like luck, as luck has it. We're in a space in the world right now where you're taken seriously by your ideas and not by necessarily your age or your gender. And that's arguable, and we're not like completely 100% there yet. But in my experience, I think if you have a good idea and if you have the will to really make an impact, and of course the qualities you need to make a large impact, then everybody will be willing to help you. That's really it. So all you need to do is just have the confidence to reach out to as many people, to write the cold emails and reach out to people in your network. And I guarantee you that you will find someone who will help you. Like if you just even like talk to your parents or your teachers, I'm 100% sure that they will help anyone who wants to do something about it. I also feel like it's never about, taking like it's never about being wanting to be taken seriously, if that makes sense. Like in the field that I am, I want people to be comfortable around me, to let their guard down, to be vulnerable, more than I want them to take me seriously. So I like to project myself as someone who is their peer and who is there for them and who wants to help them, rather than someone who they should like necessarily look up at or whatever, something like that, essentially. So I would say that, go ahead, take the step, and yeah, you will definitely find someone who is willing to help you.
I think on that is an amazing note to end this interview on. Um, Thank you so much. This was really informative, and thank you for taking out the time.